So, what's up, Nick Matthews? Welcome to the craft.
Hi guys, thanks for having me. It's good to see you again, Alex.
Yeah, it's been a while. So, Nick, for everyone out there, has shot films like Mobland, Cuck, recently Saw X, as long as commercial stuff, throughout the years. So,
Yeah, and
can you give us a kind of a brief history?
yeah, absolutely. And actually, the latest film I shot, which we'll see where it ends up landing in terms of distribution, but I shot this movie called Bone Lake that went to Sitges and went to Fantastic Fest, and then won an audience award at the Brooklyn Horror Festival. It's a really fun uh, kind of entertaining, campy sort of erotic horror thriller, and it kind of plays with the genre and is like pretty entertaining. But we'll see where it goes. I don't know where that's going to land. If this is the nature of all these things. Yeah, the brief history of kind of for me, it's I grew up loving stories and storytelling. I was writing when I was even in elementary school, and I was telling stories already. And I feel like have such a profound effect on the way in which we understand the world, the way in which we see everyone around us. Their stories are, you know, it's a great device for empathy. Like it's a way to understand culture and humanity, and to step outside of yourself and your own point of view, and to see the world from a totally different way of looking at it. So I grew up in a very restricted Christian fundamentalist world. Like I grew up at this place called Bob Jones University, and then we moved when I was in high school to Kentucky because my parents were working for the Creation Museum and Answers in Genesis, and so I was grew up in this really like in an interesting way. I look at it now because I'm no longer religious and I'm no longer a part of that world. I look at it as a storytelling space. It's a space that it respects the parables of Jesus, and and it's also telling a different version of history. It's telling the stories that we tell affect who we become. They affect the way we see the world. They affect our morality. They affect what we see as good in the world, what we see as evil in the world. And so growing up in a place that actually had a script that was different than the majority of secular spaces actually was really beneficial in terms of being interested in telling weird, odd, outside of the norm kind of stories, and looking at the ways in which stories are constructed and how they affect us. So I kind of knew that I was interested in storytelling. I thought I wanted to be an author. I was fascinated by like Southern Gothic literature coming from South Carolina and Kentucky. And so it's, Flannery O'Connor, Cormac McCarthy, um, Faulkner, all this sort of kind of material that sort of dives into our darkness, dives into our perversity, into the absurdity of life, the kind of hauntedness of it all. And I started making shorts in high school. And I was just taking a camera with friends and my siblings, and like we were making spoofs mostly. But it was my first time learning how to use like nonlinear editing software like Final Cut. I was, starting to shoot on old digital cameras like the XL1. And um, I went to college with this sense of like, I remember I saw in high school The Elephant Man, and that was a big turning point movie for me. And, you know, and I didn't know who David Lynch was. I didn't know his kinds of movies. And Elephant Man is in some ways one of his most traditional linear films. But it really touched me because I was fascinated by literature, and it was the first time I saw a film that I was like, "This is literary." It has, thematic motifs and symbolism. And then as I started to grow and see more movies, I had a Netflix account. Was the early like get it disc mailed to you, and I was getting stuff like Seventh Seal and starting to watch a little Tarkovsky and Bergman and some of that. And so I started falling in love with film then. At the time, I was still religious, and I went to a small Christian school in Ohio, this place called Cedarville. And I really did like an electronic media major. It was sort of communications, sort of film, but I think we only watched two movies in the entire program, and it was Collateral and Dumb and Dumber. And I'm like, I don't understand. uh, but like,
That is film.
right. That's it, guys. But I did meet like a lot of great people, some of whom I even work with now. And I was making shorts on my, with a small team or on my own. And so I was learning editing and writing and directing. And I thought, I want to be a director. Like, that's what this is, to tell stories with a camera and to tell stories in this medium. But I came to Los Angeles for a short internship where I worked on a movie that had like, actual stars like Peter Dinklage and Steve Buscemi and some other people like that. And I worked in the art department, and we did a lot of set dressing with porn, which was exciting for a very like, newly in LA, like person who's like figuring out who they are and their faith. And I made some shorts then. I directed some, I shot some, and it kind of in that process was the first time that I was like, the roles were separated, and I was like, I actually connect more with how to move the camera, how to tell the story with lights and lighting and visually than I do with working with actors and designing the arc of the film. And really, I still think with those in that term, those sort of terms, like what's the space, what's the story we're telling, what's the thematic arc, but I am doing it much more so with visuals. And so I at that time, it's like when I first discovered who like Emmanuel Lubezki and Gordon Willis and Roger Deakins and all these great cinematographers, Conrad Hall. Like I started discovering all these people, and I was reading a ton of material. And when I graduated from college, the economy had crashed. This was in '09, which tells you kind of how old I am. And I moved back to Cincinnati. I started working for the Creation Museum because I knew people there and I knew they had an opening with AV. So I was there the day it opened. I was doing a lot of like AV projection stuff, still wanting to make films, but like didn't feel I had any route to it, and tried to apply to film school at USC and AFI. I interviewed at AFI but didn't get in. I was making stuff on my own, and every time we'd have a project for the Creation Museum where we'd rent gear, I would take some of it and then I'd go make a short or a commercial with a friend that I worked with there. And eventually built enough of a reel and kind of had a had a moment where I was like, I don't want to be stuck here. I don't want to be making just this kind of work. I want to make features and I want to make commercials. But mostly wanted to make movies at the time. I didn't even think about commercials as a viable, you know, like way of making a living. And so kind of for me, I came to this moment of like, I felt like I needed to be in New York or Los Angeles because I felt like when people were coming into Cincinnati or they were coming to, Nashville or whatever, they would hire cinematographers from there, but often it was to shoot second unit or it was to, I just felt like if I want to be the main unit DP on a movie, I'm going to have to at least go give this a shot. And so at 24, 25 ish, I moved to LA, didn't have a job, didn't have anything. My spouse and I moved out here with like one sack of things on top of our car and got the first apartment that I like scouted, and it was a little studio apartment in Hollywood or North Hollywood. I lived there for like 10 years and just try to keep costs low. And then the LA journey was just, it's been, I knew I wanted to do this and I was willing to really go for it and give it a shot. But I just made so many mistakes and learned so much along the way. And for me, that started as I had a reel, I had a minor amount of things on my website, and I started using that in order to mostly apply to jobs online like Craigslist and Mandy and Staff Me Up and stuff like that. And I got lucky and a few things actually happened, and I booked my first movie off of Mandy. The movie never released. It went to like the Nashville Film Festival and a few other festivals, but it's never released, and I actually haven't seen it in its completed form. But what it did for me was it gave me the ability to say I've shot a feature and to show people like a little sizzle of work from that kind of a project. And so I was able to take that and turn that into the next movie, which I booked off once again an online, interview. And these are all little movies, like, $200,000 to $500,000 films. But I was like, I don't have the contacts or the work, to be able to be shooting commercials and then make a short that goes to a festival and then blows up. I wasn't, I was doing anything I could, shooting I shot a Christian rap video once off of Craigslist, like stuff that I was like, I know I'm never going to show this to anyone, but I have to survive. And so I did. It took me some years of, I think I shot maybe 5 or 6 of those kinds of movies before I shot Cuck. And Cuck was the first movie I shot that I was like, this is really the kind of movie that I want to be making. It's dark, it's weird, it's provocative, it's propulsive, it moves, it's violent, it's sexy. There's a cucking montage in the movie that has, 7 cucking sex scenes. Like I was like, I'm not. When am I going to get to do that again? And it also was about America and like about the alt right and about kind of what's going on in the world right now. So it felt very relevant, and we made that movie for not a lot of money, but we shot it in like 20 days. And I rewatched it recently. It still is relevant and still like it has a lot of value. Kind of in the process of shooting all those movies, I like discovered my voice, I discovered my style, I discovered what works for me and what I like doing. I shot a lot of shorts, and I started at one point. I realized if I want to make a living, I need to shoot commercials, and so I started using at the time there was this thing called Pop Tent and Tongle. I don't know if they're around anymore, but they were like crowdsourced commercials. So similar to the Doritos competitions where they, crowdsource the commercials, but these were done in much smaller capacities. And I used that as a way to like find creators who were making stuff, but it's, they're making 30 to $50,000 commercials, but making them look bigger than that. And so I started building a commercial reel doing that. And then just over time, through reaching out to people, through social media, through getting an agent, a variety of different things have happened. And the truth is, most of my work has still comes from my contacts or people that know me, recommendations in my contacts mostly. But here and there, and Saul's an example of, my name gets put up and I interview for something really cool. And in that case, it happened, and it happened very fast. I got a script, I interviewed the same day, and they talked to people I'd worked with the next day, and I got hired a day or two later. So really fast, no discussions with studio, no discussions with producers, just director and I talking, and them moving forward. So right now I'm mostly doing commercials because the slowdowns I've interviewed for a couple bigger movies, and then I've turned down a few movies that just felt like, I'm very much not opposed to shooting something in like the $2 to $5 million range. I love that range of movie, but the movies I've been seeing they felt like a reductionist version of something that I'd already done, and I don't want to do that. I like doing new things. I like trying new things. So it's been, yeah, I've been in LA for 11 years now. I've built a community, built a career, and even still, I have all the same fears I had when I started, which is, will I work again? Will I make great work? Will I get to do new things? Will I,
Oh,
be able to
I
pay my
got
bills?
I got news for you that never goes away.
That's what I figured.
I've been 35 years in this business and still have those same fears.
That makes sense. Yeah. That's
It-
hopefully not too long of a intro.
no, that's
Yeah.
great. Nick, first of all, love your work.
Thank
I
you.
love it. And I was able to watch 4 of your movies back to back
Oh my
between
God.
yesterday and today. So it's a great way of just looking at the consistency of the lighting, or if there is a style or something like that. The first one I watched was Cock,
Oh wow.
and
Yeah.
the last one
Amazing.
was Saw. And there is a consistency on the lighting. There is a style. There is, for me, a beautiful, very bold, very brave way of lighting.
Thank you.
Is that somewhere where you consciously landed, or it was okay, we don't I'm making small budget movies, I'm forced to light like that, oh, I love this way of lighting and I keep doing it? What happened there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I do think that style emerges kind of like from who you are. I do think there's something about it that's like inescapable, and I know I have tendencies. I know I have things that I'm drawn to. I try to like play with those, but in general, it's like I know that I'm traditionally going to key from above or from the side or from behind. You know what I mean? I'm not interested in doing a lot of front light. I'm not interested in doing a lot of fill. I've started playing a little more with color blending, like the fill and the wrap, and so I'm blending stuff in, and but the using practical light sources to motivate lighting and to sort of start the design of the lighting does come from doing really small projects. It does come from starting with, well, what's already in the room? Like, how do we sell this? How do we motivate this? But also keeping in mind that I'm still telling a movie. Like, I've always looked at it as sort of like, I call it like painterly naturalism. It's like trying to start from like a place of like naturalist, there's a naturalistic motivation for the lighting, but we're playing as painters. So I'm controlling what's in the room, I'm controlling how it's being perceived, but it's designed to feel, in the case of like Saw or even Cuck, industrial and, a certain realism. I think I'm interested in shadows. I'm interested in shadow play. I've always wanted to tell dark stories and wanted to tell stories that lent themselves to darkness. Obviously, horror is a great space for that, but so are thrillers and honestly drama. Um, and I think, yeah, I do think that emerged from a mixture of things. I think it emerged from trying, like, I remember on my third movie, it was the first time I really it's the first time I really sat with the script and actually like fleshed out. I had done work on the first two movies to flesh out the themes and the characters. On the third movie that I did, I realized, oh, we're going to be putting the audience in these three different spaces in the film. So we can use color, we can use lighting, we can use camera movement to distinctively create each of those spaces. And it was a period film, and so we had, one space for the Soviet Union, one space for the US, then we had like a double agent. So we played with mixing those two worlds. And in the process of making that, I was very controlled about, because it was being built, I was very controlled about the choices we made. And so I do think in each of those I'm learning. But then every time I go into a movie, I'm like, inevitably I'm pulling from a lot of similar references, like Larry Clark and Gordon Parks and Sally Mann, these photographers, and certain films and filmmakers that have influenced me. Um, yeah, so I think there is like I don't know, I'm interested in like haunted things. I usually in most decks use the biblical phrase of like, but now we see through a glass darkly. That like phrase from like I don't even remember what book it's in, Corinthians or something. But it's that phrase is so poetic, and it is kind of, I'm interested in the textural nature of like darkness. I'm interested in textural glass and not seeing things so. Um, I think there in realism and in sort of like this like one to one, of like sharp clinical glass. Sometimes it feels very immediate, and more interested in painting, and I'm more interested in something that feels like you're almost fabulistic because you're viewing it through like a lens, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if that answers that, but I think just it's come from both doing those little movies and also from just like, I think things that I like. And so I am trying to play with those things, but also inevitably I'm leaning into, certain skill sets and interests that I've developed over time.
Absolutely. Yeah, and some of your most recent work too. I mean, even going like Cuck, watched Mobland the other day, and Saw. I notice how much is practical, how much is post, but playing with filtration and with that kind of layer
Absolutely.
of separation. How much do you test that? How much is kind of reliant on past experiences?
Yeah, it's interesting because I do like filtration. I think it does depend on what the director's interested in as well. I like watching things bloom a little. I feel like it just, I don't know, it takes the edge off in a way that I'm kind of interested in. But
I was sorry. I
oh
was
yeah,
really surprised watching Saw, and how heavily filtrated it
yeah.
is for a horror movie. It's like, wow, that's bold.
So Saw as an example. So on Saw, we did like 5 different camera tests. The first test was Venice versus Alexa Mini LF because we knew we had to do 4K capture. Alexa 35 wasn't really available. We were in Mexico for the film, and so it was really going to either be that, the red was a possibility, but it's not something I've shot a ton with of late. So it really was either going to be Mini LF or Venice. And for a few reasons, we landed on the Venice. One of the reasons, or a few of those reasons, were the dual ASA was really provocative to us. Honestly, a huge part of it was we wanted to shoot more Super 35. We felt like for Saw 10, it should feel more. It's a film that's about close-ups. It's a film that's probably gonna have longer lenses. So to shoot large format meant our lenses would all be wider, and we were like, that doesn't really feel right for Saw, at least for that movie. I mean, if I did another film, maybe I would push for large format just to be, let's mix it up and play and go a different direction. But there's a lot of similarities between the two cameras in terms of dynamic range and shutter and everything. And then we shot with a set of, I think in the first test I shot with 4 or 5 lens sets. But then in the second test we specifically shot with Venice 4 or 5 lenses. And then the third test that I did, and I started playing with filters on some of those. But then the third test I did, we'll go through, and I did this on Spoonful of Sugar, and I did this on Cock. We go through and we will test in every iteration of the set, and we'll test 4 to 6 sets. So it's, on Saw we tested Hollywood Blackmagic, Glimmerglass, Pearlescent. I don't remember what else, but we landed on Pearlescent. We landed on a Pearlescent 1 because we were like, the actors are older, they're 20 years older, and we're not going to do de-aging. We knew that going in, but we also wanted, it was going to be shot digitally, but it was supposed to feel this filmic feeling. So we were going to add grain. But we wanted to start from a really strong, very textural base. So, and at one point on the film, the producers were like, "Oh, the halation's a lot," and I had literally pulled images for Kevin, the director, because he's like, the producers are probably going to say something. So, and I pulled images from movies I love because I'm like, these are great movies, and he's like, they don't care about that. Pull halation from movies that have made a lot of money. And so I pulled stills from, and that way he could be like, these movies did it and they made a lot of money. So, and then, so there were times when they were like, oh, it's a bit distracting. And then we would put in an 8th pearlescent instead of a 1. But the reality was, we were like, guys, we can't lose the filter. We've shot half the movie already with this. And not one person has commented on it, producer or studio, otherwise, in a negative way, since the movie. So I was like, yeah, we wanted a bold, strong giallo, 35 millimeter textural, gritty, dark, weird look, and we wanted something that immediately set you into this. I always talk about Saw as it's 7 by way of a new metal music video, so it's 7 by way of System of a Down or Disturbed or something. It's got exclamation points everywhere. It speaks in and loud punctuation. And so the camera moves with a certain expressiveness. The lighting's expressive. It's pulling from giallo. A film like Cuck, I've tended to use Black Pro Mist, Hollywood Blackmagic, Glimmerglass. I think on Cuck I used an 8th Black Pro Mist, and we shot that on super speeds, which are the lenses I've used the most. On Saw, we used the Cook Classic Pinkros, so they're modern lenses, but they have an old style look. They're a little harder to get sets of, so we actually could only get one set, and we also mixed in a 200 millimeter Nikon and a 14 millimeter Ultra Prime, and then we mixed in some zoom lenses on Saw. But yeah, filters are something I really love. I do test them. Usually I'll set up lights behind a character. I'll flare the lens, and I'll shoot with just naturalistic lighting on the character. And the last test after I do filtration for camera is I'll do a gel test, and I'll settle. These are the colors for the movie. So it's Oklahoma yellow, it's sodium vapor, it's mercury vapor. I'm getting very specific about our gel packages and our color combos, so we can figure out what's the look of the movie in advance. Mobland, we shot clean. We shot that. We had to shoot that in 11 days. So we shot with the minimal amount of GAC. It was Mini LF, 2000 ASA, easy zooms. We did a little post softening just to take the edge off a little. And that director does like Bloom. Like I shot on the Olympus Primes for a commercial with him recently. He's like, I love the look of these, and I've shown him the K35. So I don't. He might have gotten spoiled by having zooms. Just we use them as primes, but he might have gotten spoiled by having zoom lenses. So I don't know on the next movie we do together if we'll lean towards like something that's got a bloomy, vintagey look, or if we'll just use zooms and filter them a bit. But the next movie I do, I probably will try to shoot it clean and sharp and like very monochromatic because I'm like I want to do something that's different and feels very like. But we'll
until
see.
until your guts take over and
Yeah,
just drag you back to your
yeah.
there's the just judging on the trailer because I haven't been able to watch the movie. Bone Lake uh, seems like a little leap forward in your style. It's still darkish, but it's more stylized. I don't mean this in a bad way, but more mainstream.
Totally.
Uh,
Yeah.
was it your decision, or was it something that the um, the producers or the studio forced you to do?
That was honestly, we worked with a really great, they're like a mini studio. They're called LD Entertainment. They were involved with like Jackie and they just did that movie ISS and they've done like a few other movies. This movie, High Tide that's coming out and they were great. They were super supportive so that's a director I'd already done one movie with. It's the only time in my career, and I hope it'll happen more. I'm talking to directors I've already worked with about doing other movies, but it's the first time in my career I've actually had a movie that I'd made a movie with the director and then they got to make another movie. And so we had taken the language of Spoonful of Sugar, which was kind of gothic, haunted fairy tale, and we were trying to elevate that for Bone Lake. So Bone Lake is a film that I have a document that I shared with all the crew before we started the film. We had two major documents we shared. One is Mercedes, the director Mercedes Bryce Morgan. She and I have a system that really started from a system she witnessed when she shadowed Michael Slovis on a TV show. And she watched how he directed. She pulled this system and then made it her own, which is we basically build the shot list using like GIFs and still images, and we write out everything in like a giant Google Doc. And then we color code everything by there's a V effect in this shot, there's a special effects in this shot, there's a lighting gag in this shot, there's a camera like specialty camera movement in this shot, and that's how we kind of track it. And so we build the entire film. We'll even go and shoot Artemis images and then like the viewfinder app, and then we'll put those in as GIFs. And the reason we use GIFs is you can download it offline. So you can have an iPad on set that's actually here's the shot list. And what we'll do then is we'll break that down by day in terms of shoot day, so that we have the whole movie like figured out. We always have like transitions listed for everything. It's very, the lighting's built into that document as well. And then we break it down by shoot day, and then we get down to 25 setups. That's our goal for every day is 25 setups or less. Like real, and we're planning on 3 to 5 really creative specialty shots, and everything else it tends to be a little more traditionally captured, because that's just you can only do like a long steady cam shot like so many times in a day without running out of time. And then the second document that I had developed is basically a lighting and visual guide document, and it's less of a lookbook and more of like a giant Google Doc that has scene breakdowns from scene one all through the end of the movie, with like images like throughout that are showing the progression of the lighting. And so in Bone Lake, the movie actually moves from like monochromatic colors into duotone colors, and then into tritone. So the movie starts with like, either the scenes are lit with like amber or like a lavender kind of moonlight. And then the secondary scenes, we start to see like reds pop up, and we're doing, but it's duotone in terms of the arc. So the acts actually break into that. The movie moves from like more traditional camera work into kind of zanier, like Clockwork Orange, Evil Dead 2 kind of camera work. So it kind of builds and ramps into this arc into like zaniness, and kind of like, going for it. And then the lighting moves from kind of, shaped naturalism. We wanted to start brighter. We wanted to start more like inviting, more sort of like welcoming, and then move into like darker tones, and then we move into like colorful, expressive, like giallo kind of darkness. So it does take some of those same things I played with, but one of the big things I was playing with on this was we used lavender for our moonlight, and we were pulling images from like Todd Heido and this French book of photography called the Insomnie. You should check it out. It's great. It's like film noir. I'm trying to remember the name of it's Stefan Catel is the photographer. Really incredible images. Really like, beautiful hard light. And we're using Gregory Crutzen, and we're looking at moving from realism to surrealism in the film. So most of the trailer teaser images are pulled from Acts 1, really, and then there's a few pieces that are pulled from Act 3 in the film. But it does have like a more rounded look. It isn't quite as dark. We colored with Brian Smaller, who does a lot of commercial work, and he brought a great. He had worked with Mercedes before. I'd never worked with him, but he brought like a commercial edge to it that still felt filmic. And even one of the reviews for the film was like, this starts as like a European drama and then moves into almost Evil Dead territory. So it does kind of play in this space. It's very fun. The violence is great in the movie. It's, we handle it with, just wait till you see it. But we shot on Hawk Anamorphics, and we wanted that wide scope kind of feel. It's an ensemble film. We wanted the the way the fall off of anamorphic looks. But I also carried a 12 or 14 millimeter ultra prime, and I carried a zoom lens because what we were doing moving masters for some of the shots, and we were finding shooting with the close focus of an anamorphic lens where you're moving from 10 feet out into 2 feet and then around and back. It wasn't always working for our master shots. So I felt like having at the end of the day, like a wide angle lens on even an anamorphic, you might feel the bowing, but you're not feeling a lot of those effects of the bokeh and stuff like that. So we carried kind of both of those. And then we used the same recipe that we'd used on Spoonful of Sugar. And I still tested a shitload of like filters, but we ended up using Hollywood Blackmagic 1. So still pretty heavily filtered, some haze in the atmosphere, but not in a lot of it. Because the point is to go from like realism into magical realism.
Yeah. Did you run into any issues blending kind of the ultra prime shots or the zoom shots with the anamorphic, even though on the wider end you wouldn't necessarily, you're saying, feel kind of the fall off in the ellipsoidal bokeh? Did you have to do anything in post to kind of?
Not really. I mean, my experience, to be honest, because I've also mixed in stuff from the Komodo, because we shot some pickups on the Komodo, and we used a set of Optica Elite primes with same filter package. But the truth is, the images, I think you're just watching for story, and so I had the same experience on Saw. Like I mixed my Black Magic in. I have a little pocket camera, and I mixed it in. I've mixed it in on Mobland. I mixed it in on Saw. I mixed it in on Cuck. I mixed it in on Bone Lake. Because the advantage of having a camera like that is I can go there. Literally the credit shot in Bone Lake where the title credit is. There was one day Mercedes and I would drive in and to and from set every day because uh, we were staying in Georgia nearby, and I was like, hey, we can talk about the day on the way in, and we can decompress on the way back, and kind of talk about what didn't work and what worked. And one of the days before we left, we stopped and we were like, there's a gorgeous sunset happening on this lake. Do you mind if I just shoot a couple like pieces? And I went with a little Black Magic because I don't need a crew, I don't need anyone. And I just shot this like slow pan across the lake. You're getting this beautiful double reflection. These flies are buzzing through, and that's the title card now. And so what I found is in post we can help it, but in general it's not like if we're using the same filter package and we're mixing it in selectively, you're just watching the story unfold, and you're not really like taking in like, oh, this is a spherical lens. And like I think the original Gladiator did the same thing, because on the old in the old days they old days, but in the, it's like you're shooting on film, so it's slower stock, and you'd need a little extra speed, especially on the wide angle lenses. So I haven't really found a lot
Mhm.
of challenges in blending that kind of work. I think it's um, yeah, I think it's mostly I I'm very happy to use a variety of cameras, a variety of tools. I still I'm trying not to mix like too heavily in like a scene. Like we were still shooting, for the most part it's like Alexa Mini with Hawk anamorphics, and then when we did some pickup scenes it's like Komodo with Optica Elites. We weren't mixing it as much within scene.
Mm.
Very occasionally, I would say the Ultra Prime probably plays like 10 times in the movie, maybe not even. So it's, I think with the same filter combos though, you're not reading it that way at all. And in some ways the anamorphic wide angle lenses, even though I love the Hawks and I think they're some of my favorite lenses in the world, they still, the wide angle bowing can be distracting to me. It's just like, oh, there's a lens and it's not sharp on the edges and the sides are really bowy, but the V lights are, I mean, they're pretty great. Like they're pretty perfect lenses.
It's not like that Kawa 40 miller.
Oh my God. I love it, but it's like, yeah, you're going to get the pin cushion. You're going to get,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So Nick, doing Soul 10, did you take into account the heritage of the series? Did you have to deal with that? How did it work for you?
Yeah, I think so. When I first got the script, I read it and I was like, this is the best script of. I had only seen Saw 1, 2, and 3 at the time, because I watched Saw 1 when it came out in high school, and then I kept up with the franchise for a few movies, and then I kind of fell off as I went to college and stuff. And I loved the first film. Like it was actually a movie that at the time, Blockbuster was a big thing, and I remember I wasn't allowed to go to theaters like when I was growing up. That was like a no go in Christian fundamentalism. So the first movie I saw in a theater was actually The Prestige, um, weirdly,
Oh, wow.
but great first movie to see in a theater. But
Yeah.
I was, I really had to talk my dad into being like, can I get this movie? Because I didn't have a car or anything. So I'm like, I had to go to Blockbuster, go. But my dad finally was like, all right, you can watch this movie. Just like, don't tell anyone at your church that you watched this. And like, I watched the movie. I was blown away by it. I immediately run upstairs and I'm like, this movie was crazy. And I start talking about it. And then I turn around and like a family from our congregation was like in our house and I didn't know it. Uh, but so I loved the early films. When I booked the film, I was like, this is like as good a script as one, better than like, in my opinion, it's like the best script of the franchise. Because it focuses on Tobin Bell, it focuses on Jigsaw, John Kramer's character. And I felt like that's the most interesting part of the Saw universe. And it focuses on Amanda, and also I felt like this was a return to form in a lot of ways. So early conversations with Kevin were, hey, Spiral and Jigsaw, like those two movies don't really feel like Saw movies. They are shot digitally, they were shot with clean lenses, they were shot in a way that felt like they were trying to be something different. And for us, we felt like that wasn't what we wanted Saw X to be. It was, solidly in chronological order placed between Saw 1 and Saw 2. So we really felt like we needed to create like a bridge between those films. So we shot 185 both for that reason and also close-ups, like the close-ups of Saw, they're boxy. There's monitors in frame. There's people that you're shooting through like rust and chains and fences. There's a lot of vertical traps in this. People getting lifted or the seesaw hoisting people. It's a very, very vertical kind of movement. Even the control room looking down on the main floor, that's a very vertical space that's very boxy. So and our close-ups are, 180 mil, 200 mil, like 85 mil, like close-ups that are right in the face. So we really wanted to be able to do these like boxier, squared off kind of images. We didn't want to shoot CinemaScope. We also wanted it to feel like 35 millimeter and to feel textural like the early films. So gritty, grimy. I always talk about it as like I wanted people to feel like they need to take a shower after watching it and they need like a tetanus shot. Like, oh no, I got some rusty nail stuck in
Yeah.
me. And so, yeah, it was pulling from that. So a lot of what I was bringing to the table was it's 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 paying. I've talked to a few friends about it, and I think we're calling on the color palette of the early films. We're calling on the darkness and the kind of high contrast of the early films. We're calling on the kind of hard, brutal light of the early films, where I was like, there were times in our Saw film, I wanted the film to move from it starts as a character study, then it becomes a reversal, and then it's a abduction story, and then it's a trap, the traps. And so it's a in John Kramer's head, it's not a story of revenge, but how is it? It's a story of morality. It's a story of giving people choices. But in my head, it's like this is a story of vengeance. Like these people have harmed and done wrong to so many people and to this man, and they fucked with the wrong guy, and now shit's gonna hit the fan. And so, he's a serial killer. He's a moral serial killer. He has a code, but he's a theatrical serial killer. He designs traps to tease out moral ideas. He has a puppet named Billy that he travels around the world with. Apparently, he has a robe that he wears. So that gave me a lot of license to say, okay, in America we use a monochromatic, like blue, gray, silver, white kind of palette. It's much more Rembrandt lighting. The lighting is falling off. It's coming this way. It's not as gruesome or as brutal looking. The movie moves from beauty to brutality, in terms of arc, and so it moves from that into these lush golden, green, red kind of colors in Mexico, which I knew people were going to call us out for. The yellow Breaking Bad filter, or the gringos come to Mexico once again and they do this filter. But it was a conversation. It was a conversation where, like, well, Saw goes with heightened colors. We want it to feel golden and not like drab. We didn't want it to feel too sepia, and there we wanted a lushness to it. And so because John is experiencing hope, Jigsaw is experiencing hope. Then he finds this, he sees this space that's like it's this the clean room. It's where they're going to do this, and we know it's in a dirty old glass factory is where we shot at, but a dirty old factory. But we wanted to be like, these people have come in, and I looked up online to be like, how would this be lit? What would it be? You can buy like portable medical units like this for 20 grand. So if they're running this sort of scam, and they're doing this to say, three to $500,000 a person for 10 to 20 people, they're going to hit all these people. Not all of them are going to be as smart as John Kramer and be able to locate where they got taken to with, blindfolds and everything. So we wanted that to be our white point in the movie. It's sterile, it's clean, it feels safe, it feels, almost Westworld. Like it's very, like,
Mm-hmm.
it's chic, and it's sleek. So John goes there. He gets, he is also a person. He's just because he's brilliant doesn't mean he can't get taken in, because he has a heart, because he has hope, he has desire. And also, it's like you watch him type in an email, and it's like he's using two fingers to, like, he's not like technologically savvy with some of the modern era. So it's kind of interesting because it's the first movie to show John make mistakes and Jigsaw make mistakes. So then when the twist happens, we wanted it to start to become this and we wanted to start to become the, like, bent perverted versions of all those colors. So golden yellow turns to jaundice yellow, and ochre kind of yellow. Orange turns to hell, like Dante's Inferno. Reds are becoming powerful. We're mixing blues. And my sort of approach was, I don't want the second half or the last 2/3 of the movie to feel like one tone. So every time we go into a trap, there's going to be punctuation. There's going to be a big exclamation mark movement. There's going to be a zoom or a twist, and we're going to do heightened movement within the traps. We're going to do louder lighting within the traps. I also didn't want the film, like, as the movie moves into brutal, like, colors, it's down lights, it's hard lighting. But part of that was we kept eye lights throughout the movie, so that even when it's dark, you have emotion and terror in the eyes. Also, rather than the original Saw films, which tended to be pretty monochromatic, like we're in the blue space, we're in a green space, we're in a yellow space, we're in a red space. It's very like, I wanted to play with color separation and have there be an arc. And so the arc that got designed was, it's built around John Kramer's ideology. It's built around John Kramer as a character. The movie, when the traps start, first trap is Diego's pipe bomb trap. The place is not fully put together. So we're living with these like white and orange tones. The lights are kind of dim. You're not seeing everything. Things are covered in plastic. John's still putting together the trap space. It's pulling from the oranges that we saw earlier. It's pulling from the sterile fluorescence we saw earlier. And when he discovers the scam, it's like we have flickering whites and kind of orange lighting. Then as we move into okay, everyone's been abducted, they're all brought into this space. Every abduction, we built in our tertiary, like primary and secondary and tertiary color palettes that we would use later in the film. We inverted them and we've put them in. So Gabriella's trap, you see a lot of red in the start of it at the bar light, and you're going to see that repeated in her trap later. Mateo is in a blue green veterinarian office. You're going to see the blue green in his trap later. So we're building that kind of in. When we're using Valentina, it's the blues, it's the reds, and it's the yellows, and we bring that in later. So basically, we build that into the early abductions, and then when we reach the trap section, we were like, even in the film, he says, "Where am I taking to hell?" There's a lot of Catholic imagery built in. There's also indigenous imagery built in, which kind of hidden away, but it's in the mask design. So we're playing with Mexico and what's happened in Mexico with colonialism and with the indigenous kind of cultures and what's happened. That's built into the designs that are used there. But we are playing with a lot of Catholic imagery. There's the cross behind Valentina. Mateo looks like he's being crucified with this, like, the brain surgery trap. That's all built in. And so we were leaning on this idea of hell. So my theory going in was, there's all this practical lighting built into the space. We basically blacked out an entire warehouse. We could control it. We had to shoot during the day because Tobin Bell's in his 80s and doesn't want to work nights. And so we had complete control. Everything was on a dimmer board. I think I had over 100 units. It's basically the rough schematic was sodium vapor exterior outside the edges of the space. So I saw it as like color separation in 3 dimensions. So it's sodium vapor. Then we have like these greens kind of placed around the space, which we're using like a fluorescent green, and we're using aperture bulbs that are hidden. Everything's hidden inside of actual industrial housing to make it look more like chains, and and more real, so that it's practically lit. But I also want to control. And then we were hiding Asteras into existing fixture heads. We're hiding, we ended up hiding some orbiter lights inside the space for the down lights in the center. Even though I knew everything would be on screen, because we had shots looking up at the ceiling, we had shots looking off everywhere. We knew everything would be on screen. And then essentially everything is only on as one color in the film. So if a light's on, it stays that color through the whole movie. If it's off, it's off. And my thought was, as John Kramer has traps start and end, the lighting changes. And so the way that happens is, John is basically, in my head, he's built circuit timers that are connected to each trap. So if a trap starts, it fires a circuit timer, lights kick on over the trap, and the trap starts. And then when the trap ends, all the lights associated with the trap and above the trap shut off. So the room naturally closes down in terms of darkness and in terms of top light. And it allows us to move from the main look of the space into, okay, Mateo's brain surgery trap is starting. Lights kick on and lights shut off. It's blues, it's greens. And I'm playing with bringing the early color films of the early movies color palettes into the space, but I'm also working in 3 dimensions. So there's still sodium vapor in the background, and eventually it arcs back into the bloodboarding trap, which we have. I was like, what? Red looks good in blue. Like You know what I mean? It disappears in red, it disappears in orange, but it looks great in steely kind of blue silver tones. So when the bloodboarding trap kicks in, it's like boom, red. And then we of course have these like big, giallo red uplights. And when the things start to twist and the Hello Zep theme comes on, I had the art department buy 50 different spinning like rotating lights, and they gave me such shit about it because of their budget. And also they like were so loud that we had to do ADR for one of the scenes, and then the art department went in and greased all of them, and they were made no sound. But it was like so much conversation, and people kept telling me no, 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 and I'm like, no, I need 50 because I need it everywhere where it's like boom, big giallo like lighting transition, you know. And then anyway, that's like yeah, broad jump through the whole like arc of the movie and kind of how we approach. But we were definitely drawing on the early films, but we also wanted to kind of make it our own thing, and really center the audience in the headspace of John Kramer.
I love, yeah, I mean, breaking it down. It's what we talk about all the time, like doing things for story's sake and why do you make some of these decisions? Well, it's to amplify what's on the page. So, but just technically, I mean, some of these things are very intensive and seem like they require a little bit of, test and see, hey, okay, did that work out?
Absolutely.
Maybe we need to pivot. Did you have an extensive prep, or was this like some of the other movies I know you've done have been a little like, let's go?
A lot of films I do, we end up with the smallest amount of prep I've had on a movie was Mobland. We had 2.5 weeks, maybe 3. I think I flew out and paid for my hotel for the first few days just to have a little more time. But then on most movies, I have maybe 4 to 5 weeks. Saw was a gift because we originally had 7 weeks, and then some things shifted with the production. We ended up having 10 weeks of prep. So a lot of my time was spent, we worked 6-day weeks even in prep. So a lot of the time was spent not only testing, locking crew, locking gear, but also shot listing, because I think there's 4,000 cuts in the movie, and there's 30 minutes of cut material from the film, and we had 33 days to shoot the movie. But it's like that wasn't to shoot the 2.5 hour movie you saw. That's to shoot the 3 hours of. But and it's a very cutty film, so it's 2 cameras. A lot of the conversations involved shot listing, and then I would sit in on the art department's meetings to see, because the design of the trap, they almost had 2 teams. They had a traps team, and then they had an art department, and they're working in correlation with each other. But some of the traps, it's like in a script it might be written a certain way, but as it's being fleshed out, Kevin's constantly thinking, Kevin the director is constantly thinking, how could I escape this? Because people will pick the movie apart on Reddit. People will pick apart what's happening. They'll pick apart, oh, you could have solved that trap easier by doing this, or you could have done this, or you could have done this. And the truth is, if you had 3 minutes and you were put in this situation, we'd all probably freeze and die. I'm like, if someone's like, you got to do these things, I'm like, I'm done. But yeah, we actually tested every trap 4 different times. We're doing like in every time there's at least 10 to 15 notes from Kevin. We're looking at every department, props, special effects, because like the bloodboarding trap, that is our department built the space. I have lighting rigged into that. Then there's blood falling, which is special effects. Then there's the handcuffs and stuff, which props is doing. Then the seesaw action is all on hydraulics, and so that's being coordinated and controlled. It's very extensive, and not to mention, you can't put an 80-year-old man and a child under blood like that's dumping on your face, because there is no way to do it except to waterboard somebody with blood. So we actually hired a stunt person for both people. We put prosthetic makeup on to make them look like them. We're using it, basically the eyes are hollowed out with like prosthetics, so that, and the nose has something filling it, so that the stunt person can actually, I think they use a plug, and then we take it out in between. But even the stunt people are like, I would rather not be blind for the whole day and just have the blood hit my face. And we're like, we can't do that. That's a safety issue. And so we would have to lead them out there, put them there, and then be like, okay, like, and we were worried that the ratings wouldn't let us put a child through like bloodboarding. We did not use a child actor. We used a little person who, like, that's what they, this person does. That's what he signed up for. That's what he's, his mode of income is. Like he works doing this, and so he worked with movement and all that. So it's a huge effort from makeup to, I mean, you don't think about it, but even with wardrobe, like Gabriella, it's like if her jeans are too long, you're not going to see the foot break, that happens. And so you're actually working with all departments for every scene. I was given time to test certain lighting effects, but the truth is they didn't. Every time we go in and do a test, they had to pay for crew, they had to pay for the lighting gear. So they wanted to limit that. And so I didn't get to do a ton of it. And even my pre-light day, because we only had the warehouse for a few days, and they wouldn't rent the gear like one extra day. They wouldn't rent it early so that I could go and do a full pre-light earlier and actually dye all the looks in. I ended up Our last pre-light day was, we worked um, right up until end of day Saturday before Monday shoot start. I ran around with my Blackmagic Pocket because I didn't have the cameras there yet, and I didn't have all the, like, I just got the lighting, and I landed the main look of the space. And then every day when we would go down at the end of the day, I would try to dial in a little more. But the truth was, with the language barriers and what was going on, I say this weirdly, but luckily I got COVID, and so I was operating a camera throughout the movie. We would always put B camera on, like the crane stuff and all that, because I'm like, I can't do like technical shit with a techno crane. But I had a great operator, and so we bumped my B cam up to A cam. I had him shoot second unit in early on in the movie, and then I brought in another operator, and so I was actually able to sit and like do a lot more. I really tried to never stop for lighting. It was like we would maybe bring one or two units in and live on the floor, but in general, it's like rolling a sky panel around and then using practical lights. And I thought about it in terms of like, let's create a wall of light. So one side of the room is a wall of light, the other side is a wall of light, and we can dim one side up and down. I didn't get a chance. I had tested the filter packages, so I knew these are the color combos I want for every light, and I'd mapped it out on, like, I have, because of the language barrier, I actually went to every location and I either took stills and drew on them, like, here's where the lights go, here's where the lights don't go, here's where flags go, or I did overheads and I had everything mapped out for the whole movie. And that let me really have like a strong sense of like, oh, we're shooting all the control room first, then we're coming out and we're seeing out of the control room, so the lighting outside of the control room has to match inside. So I really had to have the continuity of that hammered out, because I was like, I'm going to shoot this out and then we're going to go out in the main floor and it all has to still feel right. So it was, great to have all that prep. Sometimes I think a lot of it was spent traveling, like, because Mexico City is so travel based. And the traps were evolving the whole time. Like, the traps weren't finished until really right before we shot them, and that's where a bulk of the work went. But the movie has a lot of locations and a lot of lighting involved, so like I felt like I was always busy. And somehow when I hear that I had 10 weeks, I'm like, what did you possibly do for 10 weeks? But I was just constantly trying to make the movie and figure out how to make it. And yeah.
Hey, just picking up on what you just said, that you were operating a camera. Watching Mobland and Cock, one of the things that I like most of those two movies is the camera work.
Thank you.
Was that you operating the camera?
So on the only movie I've done that I didn't operate the camera on, and I've operated actually 3 to 4 scenes on it, but was Bone Lake. That's the only movie I've had operators the whole movie. On Saw, I had a B camera operator the whole movie, and then we changed over after I done about 4 weeks, and so the last 2 or 3 weeks I had an operator for both positions. And then on Mobland, I did A camera, and I had a B camera operator who had actually been a guy who worked with me on Spoonful of Sugar, and the rates were very low on Mobland. So and at the time Atlanta was very busy, so no one wanted to come out. And so I ended up calling a friend, and I was like, hey, you can just stay with me and like let's make this movie together. So he came out and operated the camera for me. So I was Moblin was happening very instinctually. It because we were shooting so fast. The only challenges I think we faced were because it's so heavy to carry a camera with a zoom lens with monitoring that I wasn't able to like have eyes on B camera while it was happening. The director, who's also a photographer, had eyes on it, and so I think our ability to like talk with each other in terms of, hey, I'm getting this shot, we would do it before and after takes, but we weren't able to actually actively see what we were getting and be able to work with each other. But my approach was a camera is hero. I will always take the shot that I think is best, and he'll have to just find something on B that works. And that I think there's maybe a handful of shots in Mobland where like we were like, yeah, this is the best we're getting out of this because of 11 days of principle,
11 days? You
11.
shot that movie in 11
Yeah.
days?
We had three
Wow.
3 days of like Splinter Unit that we shot. Like the drag race was part of the Splinter Unit, a couple
It's nothing
small
though.
sequences, but no, really fast. And we had a second unit DP who was great too. This guy named Zach Sky, who came in and shot for a week of second unit. So a lot of the action sequences were actually handled by Zach, and then I would shoot the main unit actors. And he worked with this really fantastic second unit director, who was actually our props master, but had also done second unit directing. So we were like, this is what we need. Like, guys, hey, go to town. Cuck was all we had. No, that was all single camera. So we would bring in. I think the only stuff we shot multicam for was the cucking montage. We had HVX 200 rolling because all the porn stuff was shot on an HVX 200. Then we shot a C300 Mark II, which I used for a few select things, mostly just to get like longer lens, like 180 mil. Also, because at the time the Alexa Mini was more expensive to rent than it is now. And then we used a Alexa Mini as a cam. I had a Steadicam operator for a few days on Cock, and but in general, we didn't use a dolly for anything. We used Dana dolly, and we would do 8 to 12 foot runs of Dana dolly, and then we'd stabilize it slightly in post. And we just didn't have Cuck was fast enough and low budget enough that we had to like stay creative like that. So I love operating the camera. It's for me, like I remember when I had to step down from operating on Saw because I'd had COVID and my energy levels were low and like I got food poisoning right after. So it was like my body was going through it and I was like, I don't think I have the strength to oversee the lighting of 100 units and operating a camera and oversee a second camera being operated. So or just the bandwidth, because I was foggy from COVID too. So like the movie shut down for like 5 days, but I did 2 days where I had COVID and I was they ran monitors to a trailer outside and I was on walkie and headset. So I talked to my ops on headset, my gaffer and lighting designer on walkie. And but I love operating. Like Tobin came up to me and said, hey, like, are you okay? Like I'm used to, I feel so much trust with you. Like, are we doing okay? And I'm like, the operators are great. Like you're going to be, you know, totally fine in their hands. But part of it is just the actors feeling this, emotional safety. And I know it's something you've experienced, Alex, where it's the actors get comfortable with you. They get comfortable with who you are. They get comfortable with performing in front of you, being emotionally vulnerable in front of you. And so some of it is actually just this emotional safety. You are the first audience. It's like they're going to see your eyes before they see the director's eyes, before they see anyone else's other than the actor they're acting opposite. So it's actually a really intimate space, and I treasure that space. And I also treasure being able to make decisions on the fly. An example in Saw was my operator, Luzania, did a great job on the movie, but the last week of the film, he had food poisoning as well. A few of us got it. And I took over a camera again. And the last, one of the last scenes I shot was the scene where they like break out from the bloodboarding trap of like the special combos, and then like the kid and Amanda and all them like gather together, and then they watch like this trap unfold in the main room. Well, that's something we shot 3 takes of, and I remember Kevin was like, we have to move, and I was like, we don't, give me one more take, we don't have everything we need. And so I like went in, did one take of the boy's face, then I went in and I did like this specific movement and follow with John in order to have these close-ups, because I'm in my head, I'm cutting the scene and I'm like, we're missing these beats. And it's like the advantage of, being able to be the operator is I'm not taught, like an operator might have this moment of, even with trust, I try to give so much trust to my operators. They might be like, I don't know if I can just change the shot entirely halfway through and focus on a different character. I don't feel that with myself. I'm like, I can just go in and I'm like, we're missing this. Emotionally, this is where we should be right now. This is what I'm feeling. And I'll move the camera and do something, or I'll come around for a profile or whatever. And I feel very like, in flow state when I'm operating. So I do love it. I just, as I've done more and more movies, the last four movies have all been two camera. And I have got a couple movies being talked about right now. Nothing that's for certain, but I'm sure we'll do two cameras on them, because while I really value a single cam approach, um, the speed at which movies are getting made, multicam helps with that. And also, frankly, I think about it like this: if I'm shooting a scene in a diner with a conversation and two people are sitting across from each other having a conversation, the truth is my coverage isn't going to change that much if I'm shooting cross coverage. Like, I'm still probably going to light them pretty similarly. I'm still probably going to shoot it like pretty similarly. So I'm like, we're going to get out of this scene with 6 takes instead of 12 takes, because we don't have to shoot both sides. You know what I mean? So I like that. I also think it means the actors feel safer to kind of experiment, and it allows for. I still think it's good to plan for one-ers and plan for your coverage. Like, don't just go in and hose it. Obviously, on a movie like Mobland, we did a mixture of that, but we're like, we have to just, some of it was shooting like an 8-page scene in 3 hours. You're like, cool. One of you post up on this side of the room, one on this side, and one on this side, and let's shoot 3 cameras. And you take any actor that moves to this side and is speaking, and I'll take any, because and that's dirty. Like, that's a dirty way to do it. It's some of my least favorite coverage in the film, but it works. But sometimes it's what you have to do.
In the case of Mobland, there's one scene that I can tell that you guys share like that, which
Yes.
is when they're in the barn at the
Yes.
end of the movie,
Yeah.
and it's the choices you have to make. Some of them are so fucking brave, because you're crossing cameras that are spectacular, like having those guys silhouetted, because obviously if you put a light on those guys, the other camera is gonna see it.
Yes.
Are fantastic. So sometimes that forces you to be more brave, no? Not you, I mean us in general as DPs.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think about it in terms of like Ridley Scott. It's like he's the king of multiple cameras. Not every movie he's made looks, incredible, but some of them, it's advantage that. And I think there's something about like, oh, actually, we won't put everyone in perfect light, and we will stage certain things. And with Mobland, we knew like we're going to use naturalistic light, practical lighting. We wanted silhouettes. We wanted, deep fall off, heavy shadows. I got worried that people were going to be like, it's John Travolta, why is he so dark? Or like, it's Stephen Dorff, why is he so dark? But I'm like, it works for the like tone of the movie. So,
Yes.
and also I'm like, I don't want to be, that's a tough kind of movie, because it's in the range of like those, the direct to VOD type films. And we were like, how do we make a movie that doesn't feel like one of those kinds of movies, that feels more elevated? And then they still, was originally called American Metal, and then they still like went and slapped like a shitty title and shitty poster onto the movie, and like, we're just like, that's not the movie we made. Like, and there's better posters that we've made for you to use, but it's the nature
Yeah.
of like the artist versus the distribution. I don't look back.
Speaking
Yeah, I'm proud of it, and you take that and you go and you make the next movie.
Yeah, speaking of bold visuals with that film specifically, one of the things I noticed was the grade, and
Yeah,
like how those like deep reds, every time you see like a red wall or a red jacket, you're like, holy shit, that is like dense.
yeah,
And I know you said like minimal filtration and stuff, but I'm assuming there was like some halation added, or something. It's got a texture
yeah,
to it for sure.
yeah. We worked with this colorist who I really like, named Jacob McKee, and we had to do a very fast grade. I think we had 3 to 4 days, and so we did. Jacob did a pass, and then we got in, and then wanted to try to, push this out, like push the colors, push the saturation a bit. I think um, the main criticism I've gotten for the photography is people just didn't all like the handheld. I personally have watched the movie like 4 or 5
Why not?
times,
I
and
loved it.
it came up in a lot of reviews, and I was just like, I think it doesn't feel, to me, I watched it and I'm like, this is certainly not worse than like, yeah, I don't feel that way at all. I feel like it feels right and it feels like good for the film. Also, we had to do it, but I
I
think,
think so too. I mean, I actually loved it when I watched it. I really liked it.
yeah, I think that's how the director and I feel. Um, we did do a little softening in post in the grade. We did add a little grain, to it, or a substantial amount. But in general, like the red was always a big thing. Like we knew, okay, the big transition moment in this film is going to happen. This shootout inside this, uh, this pill mill, basically. And we also, like, because we came back when we scouted that space, we're like, we're going to take the audience into the smallest space in here where the shootout's going to start, and we wanted to some way, I'm like, to light this. I just lit it. Not, I literally went that morning and bought some at a hardware store right next to the location and bought. I was like, oh no, we don't have a way to scoop their eyes. I just went and bought a light at a hardware store and plopped it on the wall and put an Astera into it, like that day, because I was like, we need an eye light. I'm like, okay, we'll do this. And so we were lighting
Nice.
it really practically, but we put in that like silly like palm tree, like, that was like one of the hero images we knew we wanted when we started the movie, was that like palm tree sunny backdrop that gets put on the wall. We put that in the place, and then we painted that room red because we were like, we want this to feel like the heart of the movie is changing right here. And so it was very much discussed. And even the hunting jacket, it's normally an orange jacket, but we're like, our movie is red, let's put John in red. And it's funny because John really didn't like the jacket, and he was like, I just look like Santa Claus. And I'm like, no, you don't. You look like you look great. Like we didn't end up really having to cut too much in terms of like talking with him about it, but it was a conversation, because orange is what you traditionally use as for a hunting jacket. But we're just like, no, like that's not our movie. That's not the colors we want in this movie. So yeah,
Yeah, it's heavy. It's definitely heavy.
yeah.
I'm gonna say a very risky thing because I may be very very wrong. But watching Cock this morning, I
Way to start
felt
your day.
I felt I was watching a cross between Taxi Driver and Kids.
Oh my God,
Uh,
yes,
are those any references for you guys when you
absolutely.
were making it?
Absolutely. We were, yeah, big. So Larry Clark, obviously, who was involved with producing Kids and Gummo and some of those movies, um, we were definitely referencing those films. Like we referenced a lot of movies. We referenced a lot of movies in terms of like the pornography in the film. We referenced obviously Taxi Driver was a reference for them writing the movie and for
Mm-hmm.
us making the movie. But we knew we were in conversation with that film. I think the biggest movies we ended up looking at. I always watch Seven before I shoot any movie.
Me
I
too.
Yeah, I just love that film. And then we watched. We looked a lot at like. I'm trying to think now what some of the references we had. Um, it's been a second since I have looked back through those images. It was like stuff like The Conversation, like 70, a lot of 70s films, like, where we were actually like, oh, well, that's like a great use of voyeurism in like The Conversation. And I mean, I think Paul Thomas Anderson's movies are a big reference point for both the director and myself. Um, yeah, but certainly we were referencing Larry Clark's images, specifically like his, Tulsa, like Oklahoma, like photography series. Um, yeah, and there was, I'm trying to think of other movies that we referenced. There was a long list of them, but I'm just blanking on some of them now. But yeah, a lot of dark movies that I watched going in. That movie scarred me. It took me I was depressed after I finished that movie, and it took me a little bit to kind of reckon with what we had made. And like the lead actor gained 40 pounds for the role. And actually, I just did a short film with him um, this last summer. And so it was great to get to work with him after not seeing him for probably 6 or 7 years. And He's such a fantastic actor, Zachary Ray Sherman. He's just really amazing. It's frustrating to me that he hasn't gotten more of a following, but I feel like he's going to have a Scoot McNairy career where it's just like you start seeing him and you're just like, yeah, I see this guy everywhere because he's such a great character actor.
Yeah, that's a movie I have to kind of prep everybody. I recommend it all the time. I'm like, hey, you should watch this. Like, it's affecting, but be prepared. You're in the right space.
Yeah, and it's just such a weird. I love the score, and I like it's such a weird
Yeah.
movie. Like it feels almost like I think what's fun now is like I've shot enough movies that I can watch movies I made and not just sit there being like, oh, this sucks. It happens to me still some, but like I can actually enjoy it as like an audience member. And one of my favorite things is to see a movie that I've shot with an audience. I've seen everything that I've done since Cuck with at least an audience in a theater at least once. And it's really fun just to witness how people experience it. So just wait. Bone Lake is such an audience like crowd pleaser movie that you got to see it in a theater. It's not, it's a movie where you get to hear people gasp and like react to the screen. So which Saw obviously was. I mean, people were squirming in their seats when that leg was getting cut off.
That's a good. Is there so you've done a lot of like dark, heavy, again diving into what makes us tick as human beings
Yeah.
type movies. Is there an itch to have you scratched that itch? Are you still exploring that? Is there a desire to do something that's kind of out of left field for you?
Yeah. I mean, I'm mostly interested in telling stories that I love world building and I love transporting the audience. And I like making films that feel like uniquely crafted to do that. And so for me, I really do love like perversity, absurdity. I love exploring the human question of like what it means to be human, what it means to live in this world. So for me, the genres that I tend to gravitate towards are horror, science fiction, the blending of those two, and thrillers. I do want to continue to make those kinds of movies, but I am interested in films about outliers, films about weirdos, films about psychosis, films about trauma. And I hope to be able to do a drama at some point. But what's hilarious is like Bone Lake is definitely solidly a horror comedy. And I have one director who's pitching like a big, period Viking film, and if it happened, it'd be amazing. And I've got another director pitching like a really exciting, contained but not one location, thank God, horror film, and another director who's pitching like a pretty, uh, almost Michel Gondry, Charlie Kaufman esque comedy film. And I don't think comedy has to be bright. I think Bone Lake is one of my brighter films, but it also is dark and weird. So I'd like to be able to explore a lot of genres and a lot of visual styles, but ultimately I do want to make stories that shock, and in that way entertain. And also, I love to just be grabbed by my chest and sort of, feel like, or grabbed by the throat and have my chest pounding, during a movie. And it's like movies like everything from The Substance to Dune 2 to, um, you know, Seed of the Sacred Fig. It's like there have been so many great movies this last year, and there's so many different kinds of things I'd like to do. I also want, I shot a film in Japan once, and I'd like to make more foreign language films, even though I don't speak anything but English, unfortunately. I just enjoy multiple cultures and the way that they approach films.
That's
Um,
kind of the benefit of what we do is
yeah,
these languages transcend, or the languages that we practice transcends spoken word in
absolutely.
a lot.
I gotta run here in like 2 minutes to a production meeting for this commercial I'm
You're
doing.
good.
But it's so great to see both of you guys. Do you have any last questions you'd want me to answer?
No, I mean, it's been fantastic. It's been brilliant. Thank you so much for your time with us,
Absolutely.
and hope we keep the contact.
Thank you guys so much. Yeah, keep on making great work. Thanks for watching the films and supporting independent films and studio films and just weird stories in general. But thank you guys so much. And yeah, excited to keep listening to the episodes of The Craft.